Hugh Perett took grocery chain Foodstuffs from laggard to market leader. His is a story of leadership principles put into practical operation in a pressure cooker test of skill and will. Can you just describe your leadership style? What are the attributes which took you to the top?
Well, it's hard to say. I've always had a firm belief in having strong philosophies underpinning business, and I guess really what you're talking about, what is leadership, let's say. I think leadership is about providing people clarity of purpose and vision, committing them to identify with and focus on that purpose and vision, and then energising them to individually and collectively drive continuously to achieve them. And that's the role of the leader as I see it. I guess what I brought to it was that I had a strong leaning towards the philosophical end of clearly defining the purpose and vision for the company, and by that you need to differentiate from the reason for being in business, which is usually a shareholder or owner focused reason, namely making money, and the purpose of the business, which relates the business really to its consumers, to the consumers it's trying to attract, or the customers it's trying to create. And that really involves the essential nature of the business and what it does and how it's set up to serve those people. That's the starting point, and I feel that that was that sort of, if you like, philosophical thing had something to do with it. I didn't inherit a good structure at the company, and I think probably realised what we were talking about before with the rugby team, that you need to have a structure that's designed to give effect to the purpose and to help you go about realising your strategy, developing in practical terms, getting the right people on board, and I guess I think one of the skills that I probably had was relationship skills. I didn't like to and didn't want to get involved in sticking my nose into everything that everyone did, but we had good people, and I think you stand back and let them get on with the job. You're there to encourage them, you're there to help coach them if necessary, all those sort of things. So I think really those are the sort of skills that I brought to the job.
So your single most...
I think strategic skills, I did have, I think, quite good strategic skills, and hence where we went with Pak'N Save and things like that.
So your single most important skill as a leader?
Probably strategic.
And how would you describe strategic? What do you mean by that?
Well, basically it's differentiating your business from competitor businesses, working out how you can best discharge your role with your consumers, and I guess really that about sums it up.
If you were going to be giving advice to someone who maybe is doing an MBA now or has got plans to start up a business, talk to me about the character that is needed for success. What do you think are the traits required to be a success in business?
Well, if we're talking about leadership, I think the leader has certain roles, and then he has certain characteristics. And I think if you look at the roles first, his primary responsibility is to define the purpose or mission of the business. I think his second role is to define the core values and the ideology and operating philosophies of the business, which will be central to its culture. Third, you have the responsibility of developing the vision for the business, and vision really, I guess, reflects your aspirations for the business. It may be that you want to have a world-class business, or you want to be the dominant business in the marketplace you're operating in. The fourth thing that you have to do is to establish the strategic positioning for the business and the operating strategy for it. I suppose fifth, you would say you've got to design the structure and establish the team to make those things happen, and to give effect to the purpose and the strategy. And then I guess you have a responsibility to make sure that the business has got a strong ongoing forward momentum. So all those things have to be done. Whether it's a big business or a small business, you really need to go through those processes, in my opinion.
And then the characteristics of the person who can achieve all
that.
The
characteristics, well, I think first of all, unquestionably, for leadership of a business, you need to have integrity, and I think integrity embraces honesty and sincerity. It embraces morality, and it embraces ethics. I'd say you need to have a passion for the business and for its purposes and its vision. You've got to strongly emotionally identify with those things, and that's what passion's about. You need to have very strong achievement drive, but that needs to be directed at the business, not at yourself. You may be ambitious, but it's the drive and achievement drive needs to be aimed at the business rather than yourself. You need to have a good level of energy, because you obviously have to make things happen. Often you're operating under a considerable amount of stress. You might be faced with long and perhaps arduous hours, and all those things are energy draining, so you need to have quite a lot of energy. I think you need to have the ability to energise other people, and by that I mean to get them to do and achieve because they want to, what they normally wouldn't be capable of doing or achieving. I think you need to have courage, very important, because courage really is about taking risks. It's about taking and accepting responsibility. It's about being prepared to be accountable, and about putting yourself on the line. And that might seem, not too difficult, but there's a lot of people who really can't do that. Underlying toughness, I think, is another important factor, and by that I mean that you have the ability to operate effectively even under severe stress or quite adverse situations, that you don't get thrown out of gear by that. Well, cultural fit I think is very important. That's about shared values and about harmony, people working well together, and the worst thing that can happen if you get someone that doesn't fit the culture, they can be very disruptive. It can cause serious problems inside a business, so those sort of cultural things are very important. I think then informality is very important. That helps people to feel at ease, that they easy about contributing, taking part, feeling they've got something to offer. It also helps cross-functional interaction and communication, and it avoids to a large extent getting too much of a silo setup, which you hear referred to today. So informality is really about making it easy for people to work together and to contribute. The other thing which is very important, I believe, is that you do have industry knowledge and experience, and that you know your industry and know what it's about. I guess you can say if you don't, you can very often might have someone with an outstanding intellect working from the wrong premise, coming up with the best wrong decision about something, that type of thing. So industry knowledge and know-how is very important. I think it's important that a guy thinks like an owner, whether he is the owner of the business or is the leader of a business that's owned by outside shareholders, that you do think like an owner. And most importantly, that you make things happen, that you execute, and that you keep that forward momentum going. I think those are the chief characteristics of a leader or successful business owner, as I would see it.
Right, we've spoken a bit there about culture and team spirit. How do you as a leader go about fostering the culture that you need in a company?
I think really it's largely a matter of your own integrity, your own sense of values, and the way that you behave yourself. And the culture really starts from the top, and I think it happens that way. People respond to the way the leader behaves, and generally the culture would be set from the top, I think.
What was the greatest challenge you faced in your career?
Greatest challenge? Well, I think really when I started in 1977, and I don't want to sound boastful about this, because really it's a team effort all the way through, as I said earlier on, and lots of people contributed to what happened. But we really were the rear runner, if you like, in the supermarket business. I wouldn't say we were in danger of going under or anything like that, but certainly we weren't making the grade compared to progressive enterprises, Foodtown, and even perhaps Woolworths and people like that. So the big challenge was not how do we catch them up, but how do we pass them, and how do we become the dominant player in the marketplace. That was the challenge. And the vision was to become the dominant player in the market.
So I just want to talk about a few life lessons that you will have learnt. Is there one book you'd tell people to read?
Well, I was certainly in the early days of my career, and that's well before I joined FoodStuffs, I became quite a disciple of Peter Drucker. And I think Peter Drucker, who recently died at the age of 95, as I understand it, still lecturing at the University of California in Los Angeles, he would be regarded by a lot of people, including me, as the father of modern management thinking. And he was very, very strong on consumer focus, asking yourself questions such as what business are we in, what business should we be in, who is my customer, and all philosophic questions, but you know, they're very important to answer. Some of Peter Drucker's works now go back to the 1930s, so I guess not everyone would want to read them, and I don't know how many of his books are still around. I'm sure that you can get them. But he wrote a number of books, and most of them had a reasonably common theme, but for me, I think Peter Drucker was certainly the guy that I got the most from. There's a number of other books that have come onto the market since, books by Collins and people like that, which are very good books, no question about that, but I think a lot of them really reflect that these guys might have earlier been disciples of Peter Drucker too. because they have reasonably common themes. People like Jack Welch, who made a name for himself at General Electric, well worth reading. One book I did read and feel had a big influence on not just on me but on our company was a book called You Can Negotiate Anything by a guy by the name of Hugh Perett, and I think it's the best book by some distance that I've ever read on negotiation. We literally bought dozens of copies of that and gave them to key executives in the place, and I would think, probably not idle to say that book, which you could buy for say $20 or something like that, would have returned us hundreds of millions of dollars. An extremely good book on negotiation, which is extremely important to be effective at in business and I guess also in your personal life. Those would be probably the key ones that I would recall.
If there was one learning in your career which you would never find in an orthodox textbook, which you learned through hard graft and experience, what's the one thing you wish someone had told you when you were starting out? What would you pass on to someone?
Well, I don't think you can isolate it from really, David, from what you do read in books and things like that, because a lot of what you practice is so heavily influenced by it. I mean, I suppose one thing that you could say, but it's not the most important thing, but it's certainly very, very important, is relationships. And I think if you're lucky enough to have the ability to be good at relationships, developing relationships with your people, the people you work with your suppliers, and your customers and whatever, I think relationship skills are great to have. But having said that, I think still you come back to that thing that we talked about a little earlier, and that is consumer or customer focus. And to me that is the central thing. If you want to be successful in business, you've got to be serving your customers to the very best of your ability, and you've always got to be striving to find new and better ways of serving them, and trying in everything you do to exceed their expectations of you, because that is your source of wealth. That's why you're in business, that's why your business, start a business, is to serve customers, service them in some way or other. And if you're not focusing on your source of wealth, perhaps you shouldn't be there.